for everybody. I think there are a lot of great insights from everyone in this panel that apply to everyone, no matter what your level is, no matter what industry you're in. But we're especially talking to everybody here who is still a student and an early career woman in the additive manufacturing field. Our goal with the Next Gen program is to really foster that community of up and coming women in this field and make sure that everyone feels welcome and has the support system that they need in order to really thrive in this industry. Uh, so, starting out, now that we have everyone up, I wanted to just go through and get an intro from everyone. Tell us a little bit about what company you work for, what your job is, and just kind of a little tidbit of what your day-to-day work life looks like. So let's start out with Mallory.
Hey everybody, I'm excited to be here. My name is Mallory James. I work for NASA at Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. I am in our additive manufacturing lab. My primary role is working on qualification and certification of additively manufactured parts that people want to fly on space flight missions. So for those who may not be familiar, NASA has a standard called NASA Standard 6030. That's basically a requirements document for additive components. And actually, right now I'm on a developmental assignment, so I'm detailed to our Marshall Center Director's office. So I'm getting to learn all about executive leadership and what it takes to run one of NASA's 10 field centers. So having a lot of fun. Still got one foot in the additive world. But yeah, thank you guys so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mallory. Thangthip?
So my name is Thangthip. I'm currently at PepsiCo as a senior engineer within the global beverage packaging R&D team. My current role is looking at how can we leverage new and emerging technologies within additive manufacturing to fast track our package development process. So more on building additive capabilities within our labs and then also supporting projects globally that deals with innovation, sustainability, things like that in within the beverages category. But yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so glad that you're able to join us. Maggie?
Hi, everybody. I'm Maggie. I just graduated from Ohio State back in December, and now I'm working in Cleveland at Ricoh 3D for Healthcare. And so what we do is we produce patient-specific 3D printed anatomic models. So we'll have a patient that will present to a hospital and they'll need some sort of operation done. For example, maybe they'll have like a heart defect. And what we can do is we can take either like a CT scan or an MRI scan of the patient. And then using that data, we can create a 3D model of that specific anatomy. So a heart defect, we would create like a heart model. And then from there, we can 3D print that model and we can give it either to the patient or to the physician. And it can be used for a variety of purposes, like for planning or for educational purposes, stuff like that.
Emily?
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Register, and I work for HP in their 3D printing metals department. So our specific flavor of metal 3D printing is binder jet, and I'm in our research development group. A lot of what I focus on is our metal powder and how it's flowing through our systems. We have a couple pieces of equipment that we offer to customers that specifically deal with management of metal powder, and that's what a lot of my day-to-day job focuses on. We have a product that came out this year, the S100 printer, and so right now myself along with the rest of the team are focused on making sure that product launch is going to go as well as it possibly can.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. You all do really amazing stuff. So kind of starting out, I know something that a lot of students are interested in getting more info about, and a lot of the students that I've talked to are kind of unsure about what it's like to work on site full time at a job versus working remote at a job versus some kind of hybrid in the middle. So I wanted to get some insights from all of you on what your experience has been with this new way of working? And I'll start out with Thangthip.
Yeah, so right now within Pepsi, we're following a hybrid work schedule. So at the moment, it's considered work that work. So really discretionary between you and your manager and your role. You have the autonomy to determine when you can go into the office. So for myself, I collaborate a lot with the labs. So I go in fairly, twice to three times a week. In terms of the pros and cons of hybrid work schedule is, for the pros, there's a lot of flexibility. Less time commuting means better work-life balance, which is very key. And then you're kind of, at least from my end, I feel like I'm able to get more work done while still being able to participate in life's activities. The downside of that is that you really have to actively engage in building and maintaining working relationships. Sometimes collaboration is a little bit difficult through virtually, but that's why you kind of have to put in that extra effort to maintain those relationships and seek information and answers by scheduling appropriate meetings and reaching out. But yeah, by being able to kind of identify some of the areas, I was able to still be able to do what I needed to do and still take full advantage of the flexibility in a hybrid model.
How about Emily? Do you have anything to add to the on-site versus remote versus hybrid?
I will say, even in 2020, I actually never worked from home. So I've actually pretty much been on site at a job all throughout the pandemic. And so I never really got the experience of working from home full time like many folks did. And I completely agree with it being more difficult to collaborate with coworkers when you're at home. I pretty much go to the office every single day. Whether that's to go into the lab or whether that's to talk to one of my coworkers. Most of our team is on site pretty much every day. And that has made collaboration a lot easier. I came into this job only about a year and a half ago, and it's very difficult to onboard while you're doing that remotely. As you get more comfortable with the work that you're doing and understanding who you can go to for certain things, I have been able to work from home for a little bit more. Right, I'm home right now. I'm not at my office, and so I'll probably go in a couple hours. And so I think a lot of it is balancing what do I need to know up front and get comfortable with that and develop those relationships, and then being able to have that more flexibility a little bit later when you feel confident in what you're doing.
You mentioned two interesting things there. One of them is kind of figuring out what people's area of expertise is, especially when you're not in the same place, as well as onboarding. I know that was really interesting for me to experience the remote onboarding process at multiple companies during the pandemic. So does anybody have thoughts on just what it was like starting out at a new job during all of this transition?
When I first joined Pepsi, I actually graduated literally at the peak of the pandemic. So all of my onboarding was virtual. But fortunately enough for me, because we were still open, I was still able to go on site, and I had a really great team that was able to provide the support to help me onboard properly. But it was, it still was it was very difficult. You really had to kind of seek out the right folks in their area expertise to help you onboard properly. It's really about being proactive and taking that initiative to identify who can you speak with in certain areas and get yourself well situated for the role.
I have a friend that jokes that I'm the oldest of the early careers, so I'm probably a little bit more removed from school than some of my other co-panelists here. But I did start at NASA during the pandemic, and actually first came on board coming back from maternity leave. So there was some flexibility afforded by the kind of hybrid environment that was nice. So I was able to come on site some and start to meet new people and build those relationships, which is so hard to do in in a 100% virtual environment. And now that I'm on detail, I'm pretty much on site in the office every day. There's still, flexibility if I gotta, go to the dentist or have a sick kiddo. There's definitely a lot of flexibility to be able to still get things done and still engage and participate virtually. But I do think it's just so valuable to have that face-to-face interaction, and particularly, working on in a lab environment, there's a lot that just can't be done from home. So there was a lot of our team that was on site throughout the pandemic, and working through protocols to keep everybody safe and healthy. But yeah, definitely some challenges with the virtual world, and we're all excited to be back on site for the most part here. But I will say, I think that there was a lot of goodness that came out of it, like this, for instance, right? It's nice to be able to connect with people across geographical boundaries and stuff like that, and learn from people that you might not otherwise meet.
I think I'll add a little of my experience to this as well. It's been interesting for the manufacturing field because I think we might have had a little bit of an advantage over a lot of industries because we're such a global field. We have so many coworkers that are in Europe and Asia and just so many countries in different time zones. So we were already kind of hybrid already even before the pandemic. But I've really found that I need to ask way more questions than I think I need to figure out what people's roles are, how they fit together, how the existing teams really work with each other. All the transition has been a huge learning experience. One thing that kind of goes along with all of this is figuring out and maintaining your work-life balance. So I'd actually like to go back to Mallory and get your insights on work-life balance and a little bit about how you manage that.
I think being in an environment where there is some, I'm very lucky to work. So the Marshall leadership team here in Huntsville actually has the most women in leadership positions of any center. And so, I have the benefit of working for a lot of people who have been through similar phase of life that I'm in right now, and understand what it's like to have little kids at home. I think a lot of managing a good work-life balance is just making sure that you kind of view everybody as part of your team, and that you have a good support system. I'm incredibly lucky. My husband stays home full time with our daughter, so for me, that's actually another component of coming into the office. So there's a 2-year-old at home who, if I'm trying to telework, she wants to know why I'm not playing with her. For me, it's been nice for people that I work with to get to meet my family, and vice versa. So my husband is really excited and supportive about me making the move to NASA, and it's exciting time to be at NASA. We're going back to the moon. So I grew up in Huntsville. Our nickname is the Rocket City, and I drive by a Saturn V replica every morning on the way to work. So it's just exciting to be a part of that. And so yeah, I would say, a good support system. So I've got cheerleaders here at work and cheerleaders at home, and that makes it a lot easier when if work needs to take a priority, and sometimes that can impact my family. They're supportive, and vice versa. If there's something that comes up with my family, then my work team and is supportive of those needs as well.
That's really valuable, especially when you're building a family like that. Does anybody else have any kind of experiences or tips that you'd like to add about work-life balance?
I can speak to it a little bit. So one thing that I do is I have an office space, and when I'm not working, that door is closed, the computer is shut, and I don't go in there. And so it's really easy when you're working in a hybrid environment for kind of work to encroach in other areas of your life. But I find that if I have a designated space where work exists, I can close that space off, and it's easier to let it go and go focus on other things.
Yeah, to add on that, I also, my first year or two, it was definitely a struggle trying to find balance, because I just, it was so easy to just check my emails throughout the day, the late in the night. But what I've realized is that I heard this phrase, discipline is freedom. So I've been able to set my boundaries, the non-negotiables. Like, these are the things in my personal life that I want to get done. It needs to be done, And so having that boundary and setting those non-negotiables for your personal life has been very helpful in structuring out that work-life balance.
I was going to say, kind of just going along with that, I think it is about like kind of setting those boundaries, because I feel like when you're in undergrad, you know, like you go to school and then after you go to class, like you have homework. So you feel like you're always just kind of in school. And so when you join industry, you kind of have that mindset of like, oh, I should just like always be like thinking about the next thing I'm going to do, or like, oh, I can just like work on this later. But suddenly you have like 8 hours a day to do it. And then like you're not supposed to work after that. And that was kind of like something that like I had to work on, was like, okay, like during this time, this is when I do work. And then after that, I should like do other things to kind of decompress and make sure I'm not working like all the time, like in undergrad. So it was kind of just like setting that boundary, like make sure you have a balance, because then you don't want to get burned out, because then you're not going to be able to do any work.
Can I add one more thought to that? Something that Maggie said that made me think of. So I did a co-op program when I was in undergrad. So I would rotate semesters between working full time and then going to school full time. And I think that was an awesome opportunity to kind of get a preview of what the working world is like, and kind of get you used to the 9 to 5 kind of environment, and then kind of learn too how do I apply what I'm learning in this university environment to the working world. So yeah, I remember kind of going through similar challenges of like, you know, in school you'll stay, you know, pull an all-nighter to make something happen, and then in the working world you really want to manage your time differently to fit within kind of the more normal, sustainable work-life balance.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for me and my team is working so much with overseas manufacturing. We don't have a 9 to 5 job. It's always a balance of figuring out the work schedule that allows you to get what needs to be done, while also maintaining that healthy amount of work hours and making time for things like your family or your hobbies or hanging out with friends. And I've one kind of tip that I'd like to share is I've found that a lot of people don't ask enough questions when they're interviewing for jobs. I think it's really important when you're talking to potential employers that you're going in with a really good idea of how a job fits in with your existing work-life balance and existing priorities and responsibilities. And it's just like it's really important to go into something eyes open, so you can start to manage that really the most important thing, which is your work-life balance. So let's kind of move on to something a little bit more maybe technical or a little bit more focused on our actual kind of roles. So what were people's biggest challenges starting out in their new roles? Maggie, would you like to start on this?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, honestly, like figuring out free time was kind of a challenge for me, not to like backtrack. But that was like, I feel like the biggest difference for me that I noticed, because, you know, like when you're in undergrad, like you are working, at least in my experience, like I was working all the time pretty much, or like I would just have like Saturdays off, and then like in my free time I would do homework or be studying and stuff. But I noticed when you got to industry, it was like still the same like kind of level of work, because you are an engineer, and so you're still doing, you know, similar work. But like after you get off of work, suddenly you just like you have free time. And so that was a big difference for me. And then also I felt like in undergrad, it's like very structured, where like, oh, you'll have this many months that you're doing work all the time, and then you'll have like a 2-month break, like winter break or something. Whereas when you're in industry, it's more so like year round, and then you choose when your breaks are. So that for me was interesting, because suddenly I was like in charge of my schedule, and I had to pick, oh, okay, this is when I'm going to take off. Like, stuff like that. So kind of figuring out, okay, what is my new schedule looking like? Because it was roughly like the same level of work. It was just kind of a different amount of free time that I now had, that I could change how I was structuring what else I was doing outside of work. I felt like that was like the biggest difference for me.
Thangthip, do you have what was your biggest challenge in going into industry, and how did you work through it?
Yeah, so similar to Maggie, time management was definitely key. It was, it's like it was very different from, when you from college. You kind of have your set of classes, you have deadlines, or when things are due. But then going into the workplace, like at least within R&D, it's kind of things shift around all the time. There's really no concrete timeline or like straight path to complete a project. It's always kind of changing. So time management was definitely something that I learned to really hone in on, and just being flexible in terms of the type of work that needs to get done. And to do that by being able to understand the priorities within the deliverables really helped me kind of focus in on where it made the most sense at the time, under constraints. But yeah, I mean, really just assessing the situation. And then what I also learned was, aside from all the technical skills that we bring in, there's a lot of soft skills that go into it. We collaborate so much with everyone. So the soft skills were really important, and honing in on those, because you go from college where you're kind of assigned on team projects, whereas in industry, there's a set of folks that you really have to collaborate with throughout your career, and just in general. So your soft skills on top of your technical skills combined is really beneficial as you progress in your career.
How do you prioritize what you're doing day to day in something like an R&D field?
Within Pepsi, at least, we have our objectives that roll down from, senior management, and just like our overall business goals. So every year we review what our, objectives are for the year. We set our own. In addition to the R&D work, building capabilities, we also are more like a technical support group. So we support projects globally, in other regions, who may not have the direct resources to complete their developmental work. Understanding business priorities really helped me determine, which projects were, I guess, like the big bets that really we need all hands on deck, and which projects we could possibly look at external service providers to come in and assist. So really understanding the business objectives and goals helped me navigate through the different types of project that I should focus that time and energy in supporting. That has really helped me throughout my years here.
I think for me, a lot of it is being really upfront with my direct manager. Right, in R&D, you're always going to have more work than you can actually do, and so that can become overwhelming. But what I do is, right, I have a list. I say, these are the things I'm working on. Here's a nice water line. Here's all the things underneath that I'm not working on, and saying, if there's something below that list that in your mind or senior management's mind needs to come up above that, and for me to start working on, then just let me know. These are what I'm working on, and if that's not what's right, then please let me know. And so I think that direct communication with whoever you're directly reporting to, whether that's a technical person or a management person, has been really key for making sure that what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis is what's most valuable for the team.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable, because there's always more work than you can actually get done. So I kind of wanted to get some more insight on that communication style. What's kind of your structure in how you you work with your manager to set these priorities. And feel free for anyone to jump in on that. I know. Usually, what I do is we have a weekly sync, and I go through what my priorities are and make sure that we're both aligned on what I should absolutely positively get done in the next week versus what's a nice to have, or what just make my priority list so that I make sure that a week later we're not going back and saying, oh man, yeah, that really had to get done.
Yeah, so I'll jump in. So, I mean, when I first started, fresh out of college, I think I had pretty regular tags with my management, to make sure that I was prioritizing the right tasks, and always asking for kind of deadlines and milestones, and what does success look like, right? And making sure everybody's on the same page about those things. And then I would say, the longer that you're in your role and you start to kind of understand maybe where your smaller, your team or your organization fits into the larger ecosystem, you can start to have more of a strategic vision, for, hey, what is my team's role? Um, and then you can kind of drive more of your own task list, and have some vision for, what, rather than needing direction on what needs to be done. You start to see it yourself, and you can kind of work those priorities, and then the check-in with management can become less frequent. So I think that, that just comes with time, and with being part of the team, and understanding, who's who, and who do you, need to partner with, and understand, who am I supporting, who are my customers. And I think then that kind of comes with time, and you can start to take on more responsibility and kind of drive more of that yourself. And then I think too, some of that just comes with uh the longer I've been around, the more I've realized that, there's an aspect of my job that's not transactional. So, there's probably 10 to 20% that is things like developing early career folks, and um, learning more about other, you know, other puzzle pieces, right? My team may be part of that. How do we drive additive to support our customers, right? So for Marshall, that's rocket engines. So um, things like that, right? Just comes with time, and being observant and things like that.
One thing you kind of touched on there is really keeping an eye on what the long-term mission is, and especially kind of having that long-term game on building all the relationships with different teams. I think one of the worst things that you can do is get so focused on a deadline, or so focused on a shorter term project that you kind of lose a relationship, or lose a reputation with one of the teams or one of the people that you work with.
One last comment. So I really like when I first started, I really struggled with managing, what types of work needed to get done. Um, and in terms of communication, I was fortunate enough to have a really great manager who, really we connected very often in terms of like workload and, reallocating work. What I've learned to do was to create this list of task, outcome, impact. So it really helps me visualize what am I working on, what is the outcome and what is it impacting? Because I realized, within my first 2 years, I really spent a lot of time. I just took any type of, any assignment to me, and I was just like go off and run with it. But I realized that it's not sustainable, right? You can't accomplish everything. There's so much more that needs to get done, but you literally can't do it. So by mapping out, the work that I've been doing and understanding what the outcome is and how is it impacting the objectives, the business, goals, it kind of helped me again, like along the priority line, reprioritize, where I should shift my focus and attention on. so that it's more sustainable and I'm still getting the right type of work done.
All really good points. We just talked quite a bit about interacting with different teams. So what kind of teams do people usually interact with on a day-to-day basis?
I interact a lot with our team in Corvallis, the engineering team, on a day-to-day basis. That's who most of my communication is with. We also have an entire team that is running basically our 3D printing lab. And so making sure that the relationship between the engineering team and basically the lab team is as good as possible, I think is really important. So I talk to technicians and operators on a day-to-day basis as well. And then we also have a large portion of our team that sits over in Barcelona. And so the time difference there is quite a bit. When it's 7 a.m. on the West Coast, it's 4 p.m. in Barcelona. And so oftentimes you'll be meeting at hours of the day that are not really good for anyone. And so making sure that you really prioritize what you're doing at those times is really, really important. And then maintaining those relationships across the ocean, it can be difficult, but it's also really important. So one thing that is always top of my mind is whenever we have somebody over here from Barcelona or some of our people are over there, making sure that, the time that is being spent there is being spent in a way that's actually beneficial. And then, of course, outside of work, those relationships really benefit from having a little bit of personal time, whether you go to dinner or you go to drinks or something like that, and making sure that, there's a little bit of that personal connection there as well. And it's not just a work relationship. And so, oftentimes starting off meetings with a little bit of, how are you, kind of what's going on over there. Any sort of kind of small talk so you can have that kind of personal connection is really important. And one thing that's been really helpful too is if you have kind of one or two people over there that you can go to with problems, and you can say, hey, I really need this information, or can you help me out with this? And then they know who is over there, much better than you do. And so having kind of your one or two almost like champions on different sites or different teams is really, really helpful for kind of getting what you need done. And that can be true of just teams that you work with that are sitting on the same site, but you're not a direct member of, saying, you are basically the person I go to with my issues, and you can come back to me with problems on our team from your side. And I find that that's a pretty effective way to get things done and maintain those working relationships.
Yeah, I think there's kind of a lot we can learn, especially talking to the people on our team who are overseas. Like I remember kind of a really interesting conversation that came up because we had a couple minutes at the beginning, and just like you said, we just started asking each other questions, and we really learned a lot because it turned out at this moment, it was right in the middle of all of the very, very stringent COVID policies that had just been rolled out in China, and we had no idea before that moment exactly how far-reaching all those implications were. And the reason that conversation started is just like you said, those couple minutes at the beginning of the meeting. So yeah, I'll invite everyone else to kind of jump in and share what disciplines or what kind of types of coworkers you normally interact with on a daily basis.
I was going to say for me, I got pretty lucky because Ricoh for healthcare is like sort of like a subset of Ricoh. So it's kind of like a startup within like a bigger company. So I like got to meet pretty much everybody that was like on my team, but that like included people that weren't necessarily in engineering. It was people in like sales, production, just like the business aspects, stuff like that. And I don't really have a business background. So that was really cool to like meet with people that had a totally different background than I did, and just sort of like ask questions about stuff like that. Like, oh, how does this business aspect work? How does this sales aspect work? So even just from a learning perspective, it was cool to meet people with just completely different backgrounds than what I had. So I was really lucky in that aspect.
So I can jump in. I think that one thing that I don't guess I realized coming out of school was how important it is to be able to, uh, communicate really technical things, but at a 40,000-foot view, right? So, um, right now, being on this detail assignment that I'm on, I'm learning, for when you make it high up in an organization, an executive's time is precious, right? So something that, the technical team might geek out over for hours, you might have 30 seconds to 5 minutes to talk, to articulate to somebody that is making a decision. And so I think that's incredibly important, is learn how to be a concise speaker, know your audience, know what does this person want to know? Why am I having this conversation with them? And know when you should get into those technical details, um, and when you don't need to, right? And I think that's another thing that comes with time. I guess the other thing I would say is that I didn't realize in undergrad the value of an engineer who can write. I think that there's a lot of people that maybe undervalue that, but I didn't really fully appreciate that until I got out of school. That hey, I do need to be able to write a good technical report, and I don't, it's a different skill than like being a storyteller, right? But yeah, being able to be concise, uh, and you know, be a good communicator, both written and oral, I think is really good. And then uh, I guess a challenge, I think, in the virtual environment today is there's so many ways to communicate, right? I mean, I joke with one of my friends. She'll chat me on Teams, and then I'll have like a LinkedIn message from her, and then a text, and I'm like, okay, pick one. Like, what are we doing? So, so that can be a challenge too. And I don't have good advice on that front, other than there's maybe too many ways to communicate today.
Okay, awesome. I think I'll jump to the last question, so we have time for some Q&A questions. So let's kind of go round robin. Uh, what is your just biggest piece of advice for women in these fields just graduating college?
Yeah, sure. So I think this advice is pretty general and not just specific to women, but do not be afraid to leave your first job. So I'm currently in my second role post college, and the you do not have to stay at whatever job you get out of college forever. You do not have to stay for 5 years. If you find a better opportunity or you find that something is not working, don't be afraid to seek out other opportunities, and really lean on the network that you created in school, whether that was undergrad or master's, to kind of help you find that next opportunity. You don't just have to go to job postings online and look there. You can reach out to the people that you know and already have a personal connection with to kind of find that next opportunity.
Yeah, that I love the note about not being afraid to leave your first job. I I don't think if I hadn't got laid off from my very first job, I'd probably still be there. And I've made so much progress, both career-wise and skill-wise, uh, from kind of moving on and experiencing new things that I never would have had if I had stayed in my previous role this entire time.
So as a first gen, my advice is really know that you are in complete control of your journey and your career. So be able to take charge of it, and most importantly, believe in yourself. I think there's a lot of, and this is just in general, I think, people are just genuinely afraid of like that, the next step, the risks that comes with it. But um, as long as you believe in yourself and know that you're in control, and again, you're not expected to do it alone. Like Emily said, like really lean into the network that you've built. Be proactive and creative to find solutions to your problems. Um, I've also learned that, everything is not linear. I've had plans, 5-10 year plans that at this stage may not be, it definitely took a detour along the way. But being able to be flexible and adapting as curveballs get thrown at you is really important. So yeah, just having full faith in yourself, your abilities, know that you are in the room because you were chosen to be there, is really important.
If you're in that room, it's because they chose you and you belong there.
Yeah.
I would say, honestly, just like for getting a job, like if it's like an internship or if it's right out of college, I would say like if something interests you, but maybe like you're a little nervous about it, or like you don't even really have a whole lot of experience in it, especially with internships, like I would say kind of just like go for it. Because I feel like a lot of the engineering field or like research and development, it's stuff that's new. It's stuff that people have never really done before, and it's stuff that you can't really prepare for. And so instead of necessarily like going into it being like, okay, I have to know how to do all of this, you have to kind of go into it like, oh, I can figure it all out. Stuff like that. Like I didn't know that I would be in this field today. Like if you asked me when I was 18, I would not have thought of additive manufacturing because I didn't even know about it. I kind of just heard about it by trying new things and stuff like that. So I would honestly just say like if something sounds interesting, but you don't really even have experience in it, like if it's an internship, like go for it. That's the point of it, is to learn. So don't feel like you have to be 100% prepared for everything all the time, because you can't be in engineering. Like it's going to change all the time. So that's what I would say.
So I think my advice would be to be yourself. I think that, ask questions, speak up. Like Thangthip said, you're chosen to be in the room for a reason. And I think that diversity and inclusion are incredibly important. And it's good to ask questions. If you're thinking of a question, somebody else in the room might be thinking it too. And if they're not, it's really good to have those different viewpoints. Everybody comes from a different walk of life. And so, um, you know, thinking a different way and having different solutions or different questions is incredibly important, and is just going to make your team a better, uh, more well-rounded team. So that would be my advice. Just yeah, be yourself, because you're gonna, if you're being authentic, you're gonna bring a lot more to the table than if you're trying to fit the mold.
That's really true. We had a couple questions roll in the last couple minutes. The first question in the Q&A is, what is the best way to find job opportunities that are suitable for me and my experience after master's graduation? I'm looking for work opportunities and unsure how to look for these positions.
You can go on the internet and go to LinkedIn and go to Indeed and all of these job sites. And that's certainly a decent way to go about doing it. But take a look at who you know, and is there anybody who is working at a company that has an additive department, or can you connect with somebody who works at that company through some common interest? And trying to take it away from just the job board and just sending in a resume, and try to find kind of a personal level to it that helps you get your foot in the door.
Yeah, I would totally echo what Emily just said. So I think that if you can find job fairs, try to go meet people in person. I think that, we were talking the benefits of on-site presence in the working world. The same, I think, is true of trying to find an opportunity for a new position. Find environments where you can build those relationships, because I think your resume only gets you so far. And I think, more often than not, it's building some relationship where, maybe somebody's vouching for you and saying, yeah, I want to advocate for this person because I know them and they're a rock star. And that's just not gonna communicate the same way if it's just your resume, and nobody can put a personality with your resume.
There's another question that's kind of related to this as well. Somebody asked how they stand out from the crowd, asked for advice on interviewer CV. I think what you said is really relevant. That putting a face, putting a personality behind your piece of paper is really, really, really important in this industry.
I guess if the question too is more focused on resume advice, when I update mine, I always think, the hiring manager is probably making a stack of people I want to talk to and a don't care pile, and it's like, let me make sure I end up in the stack of people they want to talk to. Um, it's tough, and I guess my other advice would be tailor your resume to every job you're applying for. I know it's painful, but it's worth it.
My two tidbits on the master's. So I did my master's in mechanical engineering with one of my focuses being additive. And when I was coming out of college, one of the things that I was really looking for in a job is something that had a little bit of kind of design engineer stuff, which I was interested in, but I was also looking for something that gave me the opportunity to do things that were a little bit more research focused, because I really wanted to have a little bit of that kind of grad school feel in in my work still. And so I was able to find a job that gave me a little bit of a mix there. And kind of another note specifically about masters is that a lot of companies, the policy for looking at experience coming into a job role is the years that you were in grad school actually very much count towards that 1+ or 3+ years experience that's called out on many of the job recs. I like this question. Did anybody specialize their field in additive manufacturing through school studies or job searches, or was it a happy accident? I think I just mentioned that it was something that I studied in school.
Additive was just a happy accident for me. So I have a background in plastics engineering, so it was kind of a straightforward transition for at least the polymer side. But yeah, most of my background prior to this role was really in the injection molding space, and again, polymer materials. But it was that commonality of polymer materials in additive that helped the make the transition a little bit easier. And now I just pretty much all things additive.
I would say for me, I was pretty heavily involved in a student-run makerspace when I was in college, and really heavily involved on the 3D printing side of that makerspace. And so I was already pretty familiar with a lot of the common 3D printing terms and technologies that are really common across all additive spaces. And so then when I was looking for jobs, I leveraged that experience to look for jobs. So it was sort of purposeful because it was something that interested me, but also something that was sort of an accident. Sorry about the cat. He likes to attend my early meetings.
There's one more question. Let's touch on it. Somebody asked, would you think there are job opportunities for international students who want to work in the AM industry, in particular, highly specialized PhDs? Thank you. I think the short answer is absolutely yes. But does anybody have things to add about international students or people with PhD experience?
I can say from a PhD standpoint, I work with a lot of people who do have PhDs, so there's certainly room for people who have very specialized PhDs in the additive field, right? It's not just additive you're worrying about, but you want to worry about, say, like thermal control or airflow or mechanical design, and all of these different specialties have to come together to make additive really work. So there's definitely space for highly specialized PhDs.
Yeah, awesome. Take one last look at the questions. The question is, my biggest question as an ORNL summer intern is, what education level will suit me best? What have you all seen as the most useful level of education, i.e. bang for your buck in additive manufacturing?
I can take that question. So I think it's good. Do some research on return on investment on engineering degrees. So I think that I talked about 2 stacks of resumes. I got a master's degree and it was kind of twofold. It was joy of learning, so I picked something just because I thought it was fun. And I knew I wanted to stay in government, and so um, I thought that, you know, there's probably some jobs where having an advanced degree has some influence on the stack, right? Um, and so I guess, yeah, my encouragement would be take a look at what that looks like. And I mean, just to share a personal story, my brother coming out of his bachelor's in engineering had an opportunity to go pursue a PhD and an opportunity to just take a job. And I think he really wanted to go after a master's, but there wasn't really an offer and funding to do that. And I think, he essentially decided he was tired of being a poor poor undergrad and went to work. So I would say it's a personal decision. I think there's lots of fish in the sea from a job perspective. Um, so it's, kind of your decision, but there's definitely research you can do to kind of help guide you there.
Yeah, for me, I got my master's because it was part of a bachelor's master's program in 5 years. So it was kind of a no brainer. And then I did a thesis, which, some of like the tuition was paid for, etc. So if you can find ways to financially, where it financially makes sense, go for it. That was my case. It was like I really did not want to pay for grad school out of pocket. So if there's opportunities where you can get an advanced degree at minimal cost, definitely go for it.
I did continue on and do my master's, and the reason that I did that was there was a specific field that I wanted to learn more about that I didn't really dive into in undergrad, and so I used my master's as an opportunity to really dive into that. And those fields were control systems and additive manufacturing. Um, Awesome. I think we're we're running a couple minutes over. Thank you everyone for sticking around. Um, yeah, this was amazing. Thank you everyone so much for sharing your insight.
Yeah, thank you everyone. And everyone that did join, stay tuned as we are developing more programs to help bring you insights from lovely additive manufacturing professionals, as we see over here. Thank you very much. Round of applause. Another thing that we are working on is going to be a Women in 3D Printing Next Gen mentorship program. All are welcome. And our goal is to help connect you with professionals so that you can help have someone to help guide your career as you figure out what are your next steps as well. In the meantime, I will turn this off to present off. If you want to stick around and connect with your peers and other folks that are interested in additive manufacturing, you're more than welcome to hang out at the virtual tables, turn on your camera and mic, and get connected. In the meantime, thank you everybody for your time.
Thanks so much, you guys.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.